heated battle for a toss-up seat on Capitol Hill.
I ran for Congress because I'm tired of D.C. politics inflicting themselves on our communities and our priorities.
Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp Perez reclaiming District 3 after a red decade. Republican Joe Kent back for a rematch 2 years later.
I'm solely focused on taking down Marie Perez and taking our district back.
Now, with control over Congress potentially on the line, the pair face off under the national spotlight. This is Debate Night, the race for Washington's 3rd Congressional District.
Two candidates for Congress facing off here in the Coin 6 studios. Thanks for joining us for tonight's debate. I'm Coin 6 Political Director Ken Boddy and host of Eye on Northwest Politics. I'm joined by veteran political reporter Lisa Balick, who has covered politics in Oregon and Washington State from the city halls to the halls of Congress. Lisa?
Well, let's meet our candidates for Washington Congressional District 3. First, the incumbent, freshman Democratic Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, who owns a car repair business in Portland and lives in Southwest Washington. And her Republican challenger, Joe Kent, a former Green Beret, Special Forces veteran, a resident of Yacolt. It's a rematch of the same race for Washington's 3rd District from 2 years ago.
Well, here are the rules for tonight's debate. We will ask the questions, Lisa and I. Each candidate will get 1 minute for a response. If we decide that a follow-up or rebuttal is needed, each candidate will get 30 seconds for that. Now, at the end of our debate, each candidate will get a 1 minute closing statement with no rebuttals. And our first question tonight comes from Lisa and is for both candidates.
Well, first starting off with Mr. Kent about the I-5 bridge. Oregon, Washington, the federal government have pledged billions of dollars for replacement for the aging bridge. Do you support replacing the I-5 bridge, and what are your perhaps concerns about it?
So unfortunately, the current plan replaces a 3-lane bridge with a 3-lane bridge for billions of dollars. It does nothing to relieve congestion. Oh, and it's going to give us light rail that dumps downtown Portland's problems into downtown Vancouver. This and the tolling that will inevitably come with it are the plan right now. And so what I support is us replacing the bridge and getting a 3rd bridge. So we need to make sure that we have a 3rd bridge that actually gives us real congestion relief. The federal funding needs to specifically go towards replacing that 3rd bridge. And we have to ensure that the federal funding doesn't come with light rail. Unfortunately, my opponent's current plan right now is to stick light rail on the bridge and give us no congestion relief whatsoever. The Oregon side will inevitably add tolls, which benefits the Portland metropolitan area, but it is a horrible deal for Southwest Washingtonians who have to commute into the Portland metro area. Tolls and light rail have been rejected on 3 separate occasions by the residents of Clark County. So no tolls, no light rail, build a 3rd bridge.
All right, we'll be following up on those 2 issues here in just a moment. But to follow up on this 3rd bridge, the I-5 bridge that needs replacement is aging. There is great concern it will collapse in an earthquake. Are you telling people don't replace it and just let it collapse?
No, we can allocate funding to make sure that the bridge is retrofitted and can endure an earthquake. If it's assessed that it can't endure an earthquake, then I'm fine with replacing the bridge. But the biggest issue is congestion relief because of the growth of the Vancouver and Portland metro area. So it's incumbent that the federal government actually does its job, stop sending billions and billions of dollars overseas, prioritize our district, and actually build a 3rd bridge that gives us real congestion relief with no tolls and no light rail.
Congresswoman Perez, please go ahead and answer that question. What is your thoughts about the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, and do you have any concerns about it?
Yeah, so where I live in Skamania County, about 80% of employed people are actually employed outside of the county because we've hollowed out the timber economy. So we're the ones that are sitting in traffic, and I actually don't like to ride on I-5 when I've got my 3-year-old in the car. As a federal legislator, my role is to make sure that we're bringing back our federal tax dollars and building a bridge that eases congestion, that's built with Southwest Washington labor and American-made steel. It's also my role to make sure that the state and local regulators who are making the decisions about tolling and the design of the bridge are hearing from a representative sample of our community when they're making that decision. I hear from my neighbors, what's it going to be like when they're sitting in traffic, missing their kid's football game, and they watch a light rail go past with 4 people on it. I think that's a real concern we have to take seriously and acknowledge that tolls are a regressive tax. I've been really clear in that. It's also my job to make sure that we're bringing back as much federal dollars as we can right home to Southwest Washington.
Congresswoman Perez, what about Mr. Kent's idea about a third bridge?
Yeah, he's talked about like eminent domaining someone's farmland in Ridgefield to build a third bridge. Like, that's crazy. I don't know anybody like that wants to give up their farmland for that. I mean, he's literally trying to sell us a bridge. And, you know, it's magical thinking.
Congressman, you talk about eminent domain. With the I-5 replacement, part of that plan right now is that they would have to take more than 40 homes, more than 35 businesses, and ask those people to move out because they need that land. What do you tell those people?
Yeah, it's a terrible choice, and it's a terrible situation. You know, I think about what that would be like, and I can't imagine what it's like for them. You know, one of my roles is to make sure that they are fairly compensated. I take very, very seriously constituent casework. Anytime I have a constituent engaging with a federal agency, I'm really proud of making sure they have accountability and a responsive agency.
Now, Mr. Kent, you're against tolling. If we don't have tolls on the bridge, how do we pay for the bridge and the maintenance of it?
The federal government takes in $5 trillion in annual tax revenue. Our federal government right now is prioritizing to send hundreds of billions of dollars overseas to get us engaged in foreign wars and to worry about other countries' infrastructure. That's exactly what my opponent has voted for. She's voted to send hundreds of billions of dollars overseas and not prioritize the district. It's finally time for our elected officials in Washington, D.C. to really put the people of the district and the country first. Interstate commerce, a bridge between two states that actually does congestion relief, that is what the federal government should be doing, not sending our money overseas.
Shouldn't the people who use the bridge help pay for it?
Our federal taxpayer dollars have already paid for it. Her current plan right now is for state taxpayer dollars to pay for it, federal taxpayer dollars to pay for it, and if you use the bridge, to pay for it again when you actually use it via a toll. With the current plan right now, she can say that she's against tolls all day long, but there's nothing that's going to prevent Oregon from putting tolling on there. If the federal government constructs a third bridge, it will actually give us real congestion relief. She laid it out right there. People don't want to sit in traffic. The area has grown. We need real congestion relief. Building a new bridge, that's the way to do it. And it's paid for with all federal funding, and that prevents Oregon or Washington from putting tolls or light rail on it.
Congresswoman, your response.
It's magical thinking to think that we're just going to be building bridges all over the place. We need to take seriously the infrastructure that our small business community relies on, that our farmers rely on. $132 million of freight crosses that bridge every day. It's effectively, you know, pretzel sticks and chocolate pudding right now. It's not seismically secure. It's been deemed functionally obsolete by the Department of Transportation. And I got the Secretary of Transportation to come stand on the bridge and feel it shake when the trucks go past. That's how I brought money home.
Are you open to tolling?
My work is to make sure that tolls are eliminated or reduced, or the amount of time that we're paying them is as low as possible.
Lisa, we're going to move on to the subject of immigration now. You have a question there.
Yes. Question for you, starting off with Congresswoman. Immigration is on the top of mind of many Americans right now, especially regarding our southern border. How should Congress address this issue? Is the U.S. maintaining itself as a place where immigrants are welcome? You know,
I know it's not racist to want a secure southern border, and I've been really adamant taking on the Biden administration over their failed immigration policies. I'm proud that I helped advocate and bring back an asylum policy that's not being abused, working to reinstate Title 42. You know, I have family members who work for Border Patrol. I watched my father be extorted by corrupt cops in Mexico when I was a kid. I know how serious it is. It's personal for me. And I'm really committed to ensure that we're defunding the cartels that are benefiting and getting money from trafficking human lives and the fentanyl that's hollowing out rural communities like mine.
Mr. Kent, shouldn't there be a legal pathway for immigrants to become U.S. citizens coming across the border?
There already is. It's just being exploited because one of the first votes that she took in Congress, one of the first votes my opponent took in Congress, was to leave Biden and Kamala Harris's border wide open. And now we've had fentanyl pumped into the district. Our district is now suffering from a fentanyl epidemic. I was just talking with the father of Johnny Letty and then the parents of Ruth Richards, who's a toddler who was killed by fentanyl overdoses. This fentanyl epidemic is affecting real people. One of the first votes she took was to leave the border wide open, and then she came back to the district and said, no one stays awake at night worrying about the southern border. But the families that are suffering from this fentanyl epidemic, they are staying awake at night, mourning the losses of their loved ones. And this is a direct result. This fentanyl epidemic is a direct result of that open southern border. We need to close down the border. She has failed to do that. Every single Democrat in Congress and at the national level in the executive branch has failed to do so. Close the border, and then we need a common sense immigration policy that actually benefits the people of the United States of America. We've got to fix the broken amnesty system that's completely being exploited right now.
Congresswoman Gluesenkamp Perez, you have a response to what he just said.
Yeah, absolutely. He is taking a quote from like 2 years ago completely out of context. What I was saying is that we have got to take people seriously when they tell us, like, it's my family that can't get a spot in rehab. It's people I know who are having their trucks repossessed or losing their licenses, losing custody of their children. I mean, it's real and it's here right now, and it's not racist to want to secure a southern border. That's the point I was trying to make, but my opponent's really slick. I'm not a trained politician. I fixed cars for a living before doing this, and so, I'm going to be relentless in fighting for my community and protecting our families. Like, I was just talking to one of the directors of one of our largest labor and delivery hospitals in Southwest Washington. She told me that 40% of the children who are born there right now have at least one parent who are addicted to fentanyl. It is a crisis.
What do you see then is the best way to stop the fentanyl from coming in from our southern border?
Well, we need a secure border. That is, I think, irrefutable. It's also true that we need the kinds of support. Like, it has got to be easier to get a spot in rehab than it is to get high. And I listen to my police officers when they tell me that they need more support. I've fought tooth and nail for it. That's one of the reasons that I have the endorsement of Washington's oldest police union and not Joe.
Mr. Kent, when you look at the southern border, what can we do from your standpoint in order to secure the border and also make sure that legal immigrants don't have obstructions to come here?
First and foremost, we need new leadership in Washington, D.C. Everything she just said about being concerned about fentanyl overdoses, one of the first votes she took in Congress was to leave the border wide open. So she can say that she's getting tough on the Biden administration. She can say that she's getting tough on fentanyl, but she voted to leave the border wide open. Whatever about her out of context statements that she made about not losing any sleep, maybe that was a misstep. However, her voting record doesn't tell any lies. Go to mariewatch.com. You can see what her entire voting record is. We need to secure the border, and then we need to actually start deporting the people that have come into our country illegally.
Do you support mass deportations?
Yes, 100%. If you've come into our country illegally, you need to be removed from our nation. So the first thing that we can do for these mass deportations is cut off all of the federal assistance and all of the benefits that these illegal immigrants are receiving from the federal government that she voted to give them. Cut off that, and then start going after the employers that are hiring illegal immigrants. Because when employers hire illegal immigrants, they're driving down the wages of working class Americans and really hurting the inflation crisis here in the district. And then I think a lot of these people who came here for their own best interest, they will simply self-deport, and then we turn our finite law enforcement resources after the fentanyl dealers, the cartel members, and anyone else who remains in our country after all the financial incentives are cut off.
Congresswoman.
Yeah. Joe's going to talk a lot about his knockoff website, Marie, whatever. You can just look at my record on the federal government's website. You will see that I am in the top 3% most bipartisan voting members of the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm really proud of that because it reflects my community and our values here at home, not D.C., not his buddies who are fundraising for him now, who killed the most conservative immigration bill we've seen in a generation. Joe's making a vacation out of going down to the southern border and live streaming for internet posts. I'm doing the real work of supporting law enforcement and securing the southern border.
Let's move on to the issue of bipartisanship. Both of you have stated that you would work bipartisan across the aisle. We'll start with Congresswoman Gluesenkamp Perez. What can you point to? What bills have you specifically sponsored that reached across the aisle, and have any of those bills been successful?
Oh, yeah. I'm really proud, one, of the End Fentanyl bill that I helped pass into law that gave more resources to law enforcement at the southern border. I'm really proud of introducing a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. I voted for a bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act that mandated spending caps. I've introduced 49 bipartisan bills. And the reality is you're not playing the political football game. There's actually a lot that we agree on, and that's why I've been so successful. I've actually passed the second most number of amendments of any freshman in my party, not because I have some depth of legislation, but because I'm normal. I'm living in the same reality and fighting for the things that I hear from my community, things like public schools, fentanyl, right to repair, a level playing field for small businesses. That's why I'm there.
Mr. Kent, how can you demonstrate that you would reach across the aisle based on your views on a lot of these issues?
I'm more than happy to work with anybody who's willing to actually secure our border, stop the fentanyl, deport the illegals who've come into our country, and balance the budget. Look, she just talked about how she presented some sort of a bill that says the words balanced budget. However, she voted for $4 trillion in new spending and no cap on spending. And that's why inflation is accelerating at such a rapid rate. These bipartisan performances that she's talking about, like the so-called bipartisan border bill, it codified the current invasion into law, allowing thousands of illegal immigrants to come into our country. It didn't actually construct the border wall to stop the fentanyl. It provided worker visas for illegal immigrants so they could continue to depress the wages of working class Americans. I'm willing to work with anybody who wants to actually put our country first. I would really like to work with Democrats on things like restoring our civil liberties. My opponent has voted to give the government the ability to spy on us without a search warrant. Civil liberties and fighting against these endless wars is something that Democrats used to be very good on. I would love to work with any Democrat that would like to restore our civil liberties and get us out of these never endless foreign wars and actually put our country first.
Congresswoman, response?
Yeah, it's really strange to stand up here and hear Joe attack me for voting, holding out. There was a Limit, Save, Grow Act. That's what he's attacking me on. That would have made massive cuts to the VA. I take very seriously my responsibility to veterans. I hand-delivered over 16,000 letters to the Secretary of the VA demanding that they reopen the clinic in Chehalis. I take very seriously that work. And so to hear him go after me for not taking the bait on an inferior bill that would hurt veterans and then getting a better bill passed in the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act it's weird.
We want to move on to another issue called readiness to serve. And Mr. Kent, we see a lot of the ads from Congresswoman about her auto business that she was in and her business skills before becoming a Congresswoman. We haven't seen the same level of detail about your background. We've seen obviously your military service to the country. But the question is, a lot of people are asking is, what do you actually do professionally right now? In the past year, who have you been working with? Who have you been working for?
So I've specifically, in the last year, I've been solely focused on running for Congress. I receive a military pension after serving for 20 plus years. I recently wrote a book. It's called Send Me. It's about my late wife, who was also in the military, who was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. So I have a lot of experience in the military and special operations. I worked in the intelligence community as a CIA officer as well. And I think one of the things that we're missing from our congressional leaders, they go to Washington, D.C., and they have no background in the intelligence community or in national defense. And then they have people come and tell them that, hey, you need to spend billions and billions of dollars on all these overseas wars, on all these expansive surveillance programs on American citizens. Otherwise, you'll be responsible for some future nebulous terrorist attack. And the next thing you know, our taxpayer dollars get shipped overseas. Other countries' borders and security becomes the priority and not the American people. We need people in Washington, D.C. who can actually hold the Department of Defense and the intelligence community accountable and make sure that we're getting a good return on our investment, making sure our country is actually safe and secure. It's one of the biggest budget items that we have in our national budget is national defense. We need people there who understand how to defend the country to properly run that.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow. Are you working for anybody in private industry right now or another government?
Oh, no, I am not. I worked last campaign, and then this time when I decided to continue the campaign, I'm living solely on my military pension. My wife also gets a military pension as well, so we're very blessed in that regard. Like I said, I get a little bit of revenue from the book. We're also trying to convert that book potentially into a screenplay. But the campaign has taken up the vast majority of my time.
Congresswoman Gluesenkamp Perez, your experience in elected politics was relatively thin before you ran for Congress and won 2 years ago. What do you know now that you wish you had known then? What have you learned in your year and a half there?
I mean, the wild thing is that running a small business is actually not that different than running a congressional office. Like, hiring is still a really important decision. You might note Joe actually put a Proud Boy on his campaign last time. Having a clear budget, customer service. You're making these choices about where you're spending your time. I'm on a flight every 3 days so I can get back home and be with my family, go to church, stay grounded. And I'm proud of where I'm from. DC, you'll hear people say, and some of my colleagues, that like they own a small business. I'm like, oh, what's your business? It's like, oh, it's an equity investment firm. That's not my experience having to navigate OSHA as a small business owner or navigate a terrible tax code. So I think my experience as a mom with a young child in daycare, my experience running a small business, working in the trades, fighting for a level playing field for small businesses, that's what's informed my legislative agenda, and that's what I'll continue to work towards if I'm able to keep the seat.
The question is, though, what did you learn?
Oh, what I learned? Well, one of the things I've learned is, you watch how, I think it's been interesting to me to watch like how people are trying to move their careers through Congress, whether it's a staffer or a member of Congress. I've seen the way that gerrymandered seats don't generate a sense of urgency among their member of Congress. Like they've got a lifetime tenure, why would they work? I'd answered like 40,000 letters from constituents, and I had a colleague in a safe seat ask me how I got my phone line set up. That was mind-blowing. That feels like wage theft to me. I take it really, really seriously that I like work there. I'm working for us because nobody else is going to represent our issues in Southwest Washington if we don't.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to another issue now, and this is for Mr. Kent. You were endorsed by President Trump in 2022. You've remained a Trump supporter. Do you still believe that Mr. Trump won the 2020 election?
I'm also endorsed by President Trump right now in 2024, so very happy to have that. I really support President Trump's agenda. I support actually building a wall, stopping this flow of illegal immigrants coming into our country, getting inflation under control, getting back to being U.S. energy independent. This issue of what took place in 2020, I don't hear it when I'm out talking to anybody knocking on doors. What's important to people is making groceries and gas affordable again, actually getting the fentanyl out of our communities. On these key issues, my opponent has failed us. You can go to Marie Watch and see her voting record very, very clearly. What I'm concerned about is what people are concerned about in the district, and that's getting rid of the inflation, securing the border, making sure that we're not having high-paying U.S. manufacturing jobs right here in our district shipped overseas, because my opponent votes to let Joe Biden ship those jobs overseas. She claims to support the working class, yet she voted to send the production of electric vehicle charging stations overseas to China when we have people in the district, Precision United and Washougal, who could actually manufacture those. So I'm solely focused on what matters to the district.
Mr. Kent, but the question was, do you believe that Mr. Trump won the 2020 election?
Joe Biden, I think, is the president right now. And Kamala Harris is running against him.
Can you give us a simple yes or no?
There's a lot of us that have questions about what took place in 2020. It is not a focus of mine. There was a lot of interference in that election in the terms of the intelligence community colluding with big tech. So there's a lot of issues that still that took place in 2020. I accepted the results of this last election. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. I believe in our system. When my opponent beat me last time, I conceded to her. If she beats me again this time, I'll concede. But I believe in the process. That's why I spent my life serving, and that's why I'm here running for Congress again.
One more follow-up. If Mr. Trump wins, he says he'll pardon those convicted of crimes connected with the January 6th Capitol attack. Do you agree with that?
He's been very specific that he would only pardon people who were non-violent. So the non-violent folks that have been under arrest now for 4 years by the time he actually gets into office, who committed no acts of violence that day, I believe they deserve a chance at a pardon. He should look at it case by case. If somebody, did anything violent against a police officer, I don't support that. Look, again, when I'm out on doors talking to people, most people don't even know what J6 or January 6 was, but they do know what the price of the pump is, and they know that the price of the pump was much more affordable just 4 years ago. That's what I'm focused on.
But you said people don't know what January 6th was. That seems incredible to hear you say that.
If I went out and I knocked on doors in my district and I said, how do you feel about January 6th? I think most people would say, what are you talking about? In terms of is this something that affects their everyday life? What does affect their everyday life is the out of control inflation, the $4 trillion in new spending that she voted for, Biden and the Democrats' war on domestic energy that's driving the price at the pump, the fact that they can't send their kids down the street to go play because of the fentanyl, homelessness, and drug addiction and all the crime that's taking place in our district, or the fact that we're having to debate, can we afford to retrograde the bridge or can we afford to actually replace the bridge because we sent billions of dollars overseas?
I have to call time. Congresswoman Gluesenkamp Perez, what he said about your policies, and also what Mr. Kent also said about what happened in 2020.
Well, I feel like, one thing about running an auto shop is like you have to be good at calling BS, and it feels like that was not a clear answer. I would like more accountability and more transparency from somebody trying to represent me in Washington, D.C. I'm really proud that I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I reflect the independent values of my community. It's true that when I'm sure when he's at the doors, just like when I'm at doors or I'm at daycare drop-off or the grocery store, like the economy is the biggest thing that I hear about all the time. And that's what my family experiences also. And I'm proud of the work that I've been doing and listening to, our young farmers who've been priced out of farmland by Chinese investors.
And I have to call time on you right now.
And we are going to move on to the economy. In fact, take a look at this graphic with some information that will be helpful for you to look at and our viewers at home. It's a CBS News YouGov poll of likely U.S. voters done last week. It shows a real divide in perceptions of the economy, with 66% of likely Harris voters saying it's good, 87% of likely Trump voters saying it's in bad shape. Congressman, what condition do you think the economy is in right now?
I mean, I see my neighbors and family putting groceries on their credit card and it kills me. I think we go to the grocery store, we see the prices, and it feels like it's a game of chicken between us and the CEOs at Kroger. Neither of us likes seeing the federal government print money and spend it on dumb stuff, but my record's really clear. I voted for the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act that caps spending. I presented a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget. On Ag Committee, I listened to the young farmers who've been priced out of farmland. On small business, I dismantled the regs that are a moat protecting big corporations with compliance lawyers from small businesses like us. I take it seriously, and it is really counterproductive to try and tell people it's not bad when you see the kind of credit card and consumer debt that we're carrying in America right now.
Is there anything you can do in the immediate term to help with the situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's no silver bullet, but it's critical that we take action now. I think one of the biggest things is supporting homeownership, building more housing, ensuring people have a place to invest their money. Fighting things like, on small business, I fight things like these regs that make it so I can't get a washing machine that lasts more than 3 years. Why Dean and I have to replace work boots every 6 months. I mean, that's real. And I've been focused on supporting the American businesses and American workforce that build things that are worth investing in.
Mr. Kent, your thoughts about the economy and where we are right now?
You really can't lie to people with polls or any kind of spend. The economy is horrible right now, and it's because Washington, D.C. continues to print money. My opponent, unfortunately, voted for $4 trillion in new spending. She fully supports Biden's war on domestic energy. Just 4 years ago, you could afford gas, you could afford grocery. Look at the conditions that we're in right now. We need to start tackling those issues right away. We have to put a cap on spending, not spend more than we take in at the federal level, actually prioritize the things that matter, like building a third bridge and taking care of our citizens that are in crisis right now. We've got to get back to being energy independent. That's absolutely essential. And we've got to do a ton of deregulation to grow the economy. We can't tax, we can't spend our way out of this inflation. We actually have to grow the economy. My opponent just talked a little bit about deregulation, but she voted against one of the most substantial deregulating bills that we've had in a very long time, the REINS Act. The REINS Act would have gotten D.C. bureaucrats out of managing our natural resources and our small businesses. She also voted to allow the Chinese Communist Party to continue to buy up farmland in America and for the restricted waters of the U.S. Act. Go to mariewatch.com. You can see the record.
You have to respond to that, Congresswoman.
I actually introduced legislation to fight back against the farmlands, being bought up by foreign investors who are our adversaries. I take it really seriously. It's one of the reasons that I have the endorsement of the Washington State Farm Bureau and he doesn't, because I'm listening to people. I'm listening to our barley growers. I'm listening to people in aquaculture. Those are my friends. And it's just not true that I'm supporting that. And I'm proud of my work to support a level playing field. We're importing 40% of the fresh fruits and vegetables we grow in this nation. That should make everybody's hair raise up on the back of their neck. And I'm working to stop that.
Congresswoman, you both emphasize improving the lives of the middle class here. And we're on that topic right now. What actions would you take or are you taking in Congress right now to improve the lives of everyday people, especially in the area of inflation?
Yeah, well, one of the things is we need more competition in the market. We need a clearer regulatory environment for small businesses. We see the way that big corporations use some of these regs as a moat, protecting them from fair competition by family businesses like mine. That's one of the reasons that I am fighting for the right to repair legislation. I'm getting, I think, 27 Republicans on my bill right now. I'm proud of that work to support agency and repair, so we're not, turned into a permanent class of renters by manufacturers, but instead stewards of the things that we make. That's a really key area where we can bring down the cost for people, increasing competition, having more family farms. That's another really important part of bringing down the cost of eggs. Not a generic rant, about whatever bill, but the real work of growing our economy and supporting our farmers.
And I think we're about ready for a break, I believe.
I think so. All right. We've taken care of that topic. We'll be right back right after this.